Hey everybody, this is Joe. Thank you for watching my Giga-Texas construction update video. Well, it's no secret that Giga-Texas is having the boring company prepare to make a tunnel connecting the east and west sides underneath the main highway. And much of the equipment for the Proofrock 3 is on site. It is being assembled, and preparations are getting close to the point where we'll actually start seeing the tunneling. Now, many people have asked, what is this going to be like? I thought I would take a few examples of similar tunnel boring machines and compare with what we'll see with the Proofrock 3 to get an idea of what we can expect as the tunnel process begins. Now, this image is of a similar kind of tunnel boring machine to the Proofrock 3. Gives you some views inside of how the operation may work. This is the actual Proofrock 3 in the process of being assembled, and we'll go through some of the various parts and pieces and how it will operate. But generally what we're seeing here is what is reflected in this illustration and give you an idea of how that tunnel process will take place once that begins. Typically, tunnel boring machines are delivered on site in separate modules that are assembled in the location where the tunneling will commence. We've seen that here at Giga-Texas. These two images are early on when the Proofrock 3 was delivered and started to have the assembly process in that pit where the tunneling will begin. In addition to that, to allow the tunneling to progress, a thrust structure or a thrust ring is installed, and this is what the tunnel will press against to make the tunneling happen. We actually saw this delivery of the tunnel thrust ring earlier on in January. And in order for it to work properly, it needs to have mounts deeply embedded into the ground. We saw this construction with that frame getting concrete around it. This is what it appeared like after it was completed. You can see those 4 eyelets. That is what the thrust ring is attached to. And this image here shows you that thrust ring has been installed at the aft end of the Proofrock 3 recently. The basic idea of the tunnel construction is using modules in sections and assembled together inside the tunnel as it's being manufactured, and it would look something like this illustration. These segments are manufactured by the boring company over at their Bastrop, Texas site and brought in by trucks and delivered here at Giga-Texas. This image gives you an idea of some of the tunnel segments that have been delivered. There's going to be probably over 12,000 of these once the tunnel is completed, so this is a small fraction of what we will eventually see. The initial start of the tunnel begins with 2 segments of the tunnel composed of these modular segments. Large pistons push against these concrete segments and the thrust ring to push the tunnel boring machine forward. The cutting head digs into the dirt, and the dirt spoils are pulled out and then used with that conveyor system that we'll see here shortly. The pistons then retract. Another section of the tunnel using those modular concrete segments is attached, and then the pistons push against that, and this process continues as the boring machines get further into the tunnel. Now, as that happens, the additional segments of the tunnel are added, and this is what they look like here at Giga-Texas. And as that tunnel gets longer and longer, these segments are installed at that aft end of the tunnel boring machine and continue into the tunnel. Once the tunnel has progressed to this point, it no longer needs that thrust ring, so it is removed, and instead a series of tracks are installed to follow along with the tunnel boring machine as it continues to progress with the tunnel, and it brings in these concrete modular sections so that the tunnel shell can be continually installed during the process. The thrust pistons are supported at the last segment ring installed and continue to press the drilling head into the soil. The force of the thrust pistons is transferred to the rotating cutting wheel, while the cutting tools on the cutting wheel remove the soil from the tunnel face during tunneling operations. Openings in the cutting wheel transport the soil into the excavation chamber, which is completely filled with soil and supports the tunnel face. There is an opening behind the drill head for the screw conveyor to pick up and transport the dirt or the spoils away from this section up through this part of the boring tunnel machine and into a conveyor system. And what the boring company uses is this external belt cassette, and it will have a belt that goes through the Proofrock 3 out to this area and remove the dirt and put it into this concrete section. Another important part of the operation is a mortar or a grout mixing plant. This produces required injection material that fills the gap between the segments and the soil inside the tunnel. This is the setup here at Giga-Texas that performs this function. Well, there you have it, a quick overview of how tunnel boring machines operate and the various parts and pieces that go together to make the tunneling operations possible. I hope that you found this discussion helpful and puts into context what we're seeing here at Giga-Texas with the assembly and preparing for operations of the Prufrock 3 and the supporting infrastructure that has been installed. I'd like to thank my viewer David Salisbury and Patreon Desi Doolin for their help in putting together this information. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great afternoon, and I hope that you found this informative. If you would like to support my efforts, please consider using these links, which will be in the video description. If you are interested in Tesla products, you can help yourself and support me by using my referral code. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons on my YouTube video, as this helps as well. Thank you. My drones are ready and raring to go. Let's go flying over Giga-Texas. Happy Valentine's Day. We have a little fog on the south end of the factory and kind of reaching up over the roof section, so very neat to see. We're going to start here at the middle section with the old outbound lot. As you can tell, it has had some resurfacing done and getting ready to remarket and have this used as employee parking. And that will help with the overflow parking on the right-hand side of the screen, since there are more and more employees being hired and parking is becoming an issue. Now, one of the things I noticed here on the east side is this clearing is continuing to grow. And I'll bring the drone down in a lower and give you a good view of how this looks today. It looks like there's some excavation work going on. They're removing some of that debris and soil, and continuing to prepare this area for, I'm not sure if this is going to be for a gravel top and more of the staging or maybe trailers, or if there's some other purpose. So another thing just to keep watching and see how they do. As we continue over towards this section of the site, I'm going to bring the drone down low again, fly over where Tesla Road is going to be expanded to the east. And that would be, from up the middle of the screen down behind the drone, all along this entire section. We've seen some excavation work. We see some temporary of the asphalt, and we see some more of the preparation for the actual lanes of the road going on with this scraper that is moving down at the bottom of the screen. So anyway, continued work to finish up Tesla Road here and have the main roadway connections to the die shop and the battery cathode plant. As we fly between the trees and come up towards the alleyway, this is a good view of the parked vehicles, some of the equipment, some of the tanks. We don't see any of the crated items that were going in to the die shop, so those are all completed, at least for now. And here at the bottom of the screen, we see where more concrete is going to be poured once they finish that conduit and the storm water pipe. And then here's a good view giving you a sense of scale of a number of employees on the roof section of the chiller plant. And they're doing some additional work with those valves, pipes, and heat exchangers. A good view across the west side as we fly up over the roof of the battery cathode plant. And I'll bring the drone back down again. I wanted to show you that this new section of asphalt has had some of the red lane markings placed. They're also putting some of those insulating strips between those new wall panels on that man lift. And then here at the south end of the crash test facility, give you a good view of this new slab with those rebar short walls. Not really any progress in the last 2 days since I flew here. So we'll continue to monitor this and find out for sure what this is. There's a lot of speculation that it may be some sort of a bath for post-crash testing for the vehicles in case there's a fire or some other issue, but I can't say if that's true, so we'll have to keep monitoring that. I'm going to fly to the north along this east side just to give you a good view of some additional work that's being done to prepare for more asphalt, and also just showing you how much less materials are on this side. So really is being cleaned up, and it's a great sign of the amount of equipment that's been installed inside the cathode plant. The cell test lab here is busy as usual. And we can see some more of those trailers, the connexes, and some materials being stored on this west or the east side of the testing cell lab. And I'm going to come in closer and try to give you a view inside this third floor of the battery cathode plant. And this is going to be most likely office space. And with the lighting, you get a pretty decent view inside of how that is starting to shape up. And we saw a bunch of people in there a couple videos ago doing some sort of celebration. On the north end, we see more of the form and rebar work next to the receiving doors to get more concrete. And then here at the lift station, which is part of a water management system for this entire facility, we get a chance to see that generator, some of the electronic cabinets, and some of the wiring that is being done to make that operational. So I'm going to pick up the altitude here. We're going to fly over the Martin Marietta batch plant, and let's go take a look at the electrical switch yard for changes today. As we've been monitoring, the disassembling of the temporary electrical switch yard is really picking up pace now. They are removing the fence and the fence posts around the site. The second A-frame has now been removed, and more of the equipment has also been removed. The two temporary wooden poles on the left and that tall steel pole in between those three control trailers. There's the last of the vertical items here, and then the rest will be disassembled. At the pace they're going, again, I think it's probably going to be another week, and then all of this will be removed from the site, and the materials and equipment returned to LCRA, which is the Lower Colorado River Authority, who owns all of that equipment, and will be used elsewhere. And then we'll be able to chance to see what Tesla has in mind for that location once it's all cleared out. The Megapack site is still getting some work. You can see the vehicles here for some of the crews. As we look at this south end, we can see that those breaker levers are still open, so we still aren't getting any power to the Megapacks at this point in time, even though the disconnects on the left-hand side of the screen are connected. So I'll bring the drone up and try to fight through a little bit of the early morning sun and give you a good view of how the Megapack site looks here today. As we approach the north end of the factory, we're going to start on the roof today, and I'll bring the drone over towards the left a little and show you the ventilation system, the ducted fans, and all of the units here along the roof of the casting machine area, and also bridging over to the paint shop. Looks like that work is almost now completed, so it's a great indication that that system is now operational. We'll take a look here at the section of roof that has all the bricks on it. They're still doing repairs to the weatherproof membrane, and we'll continue to monitor this to see if there's any other additional activity that we can note showing that the repairs are ongoing. As I bring the drone down, I want to show you the current status of this once ramp, and all of the concrete has been removed except for that one small stub wall next to that open door, and the rest of the excavation work looks like it may be complete, since the excavator and the large jackhammer that was destroying all of that concrete has been removed. So we'll keep watching to see what they do with that old section that used to be a ramp. Now, as I fly up towards the north end, I'm going to reposition the drone to show you one of the transport trucks that has a bunch of Model Ys on it here. And the part of the reason why it's here, I think, is that the new outbound lot's on the west side, and I think they're getting ready to go up to the Taylor rail yard, but the timing isn't right, so they've been waiting here until their slot time arrives. Now that we are at the north end of the factory, we can take a look at the progress here at the 4680 battery cell portion of the factory. A lot of work with materials and other items being lifted up onto those 3 platforms now, and those 2 construction elevators are being used as well. And the north part of the plastics is getting a delivery with that green truck with that cylindrical trailer. And then here at the north end of the paint shop, again, we see a lot of Cybertruck castings being stored here temporarily. And they continue all along the north and the northeast side of the factory. And we'll see that this continues around the east side of the factory as well. There's also a white truck with Nagha. That's the company that did the stain work on the exterior of the building. It looks like they're doing some additional work today. The laser screed has put the concrete down, at least on this large section of the apron that is being widened. You can see that with the form work, and it looks like they're repositioning it so that they can continue the work on the east side, where you can see that berm has been widened extensively. And underneath that area has also been added stormwater pipe and electrical conduit. As I zoom in here and fly along the east side of the building, not only do we see more of the castings, but also we see this section that we've been monitoring that's getting saw cut. And they're removing a lot of this apron in this particular location. There is some speculation that we may see some of the walls opened up to add receiving doors in this part of the factory, and that may be representative of the fact that there's been a lot of internal reorganization and new equipment, such as the large furnaces that have been installed. And speaking of which, we can still see the flues on the ground next to those blue pipes and other segments next to those receiving doors. So more internal work is going on in addition to possibly adding some more receiving doors. There's a good view of some of the earthwork along that berm. Also, this section next to those towers going into the factory where the electrical conduit and wiring have been completed. And again, more of the racks filled with the castings and more castings on the ground here next to that section with the added receiving doors and waiting for the concrete apron. And even more down here next to this section where we also see work on those new receiving doors next to that glass secondary entrance. So the castings are really piling up here at Giga-Texas on this side. The testing and calibration lot is still being used, and we see a lot of Cybertrucks and Model Ys also using the superchargers because the ones on the west side are still not operational yet. So for some time, we'll see this lot continue to be used to prepare the vehicles, and now they're being shipped or driven over towards that west side. And soon, I think we're going to see this come to an end once that west side is operational. And then they'll probably turn this into more parking, much like we saw with the old outbound lot on the right-hand side. Now that lighter gray area is where the trailers used to be on the right-hand side of the screen. Those have been relocated to the west side outbound lot as well. Now here's a good view of the extension of Robotic Avenue heading off to the left and into that very thin mist or fog right now. So fortunately it's clearing up as we fly the drone this direction. See more of the concrete materials on the trailers waiting for their turn to be installed into the multi-level parking garage. And we can also see how it's continuing to grow towards the east. This is a good close-in view of the work that is going on. And coming up on the left-hand side of the screen, we can see that 2 new sections that have added the structure towards the east are getting more of their altitude with the double T panels, and the upper level concrete columns have been installed as well. As I maneuver around the cranes, I'll give you a good view of the work that's going on in the roof section. They're preparing another large area with that mesh rebar so that they can pour more concrete, very similar to what we see in the middle and left-hand side of the screen. And I'll maneuver the drone around to give you just another view of the multi-level parking garage. On this corner, we see that staircase, and on the upper left, we see the staircase and elevator for all of the floors here at the multi-level parking garage. Here on the south end, where the building extension is underway, also those very large tanks, we have a lot of new developments that I want to show you. I'll zoom in first and give you a view of the tanks. We see that another level has been added, or in the process of being added right now. They're now 6 levels tall. And on the bottom, we can see the tops for these tanks. And we'll come back for a closer view here shortly. But I also want to show you the progress with the steel structure for the extension. We see more of the work being done to install the glass panes on the southeast side. And they're also doing some work to increase the perimeter grade beam on the bottom right. And I'll give you a closer view of that shortly. But the crews are right now adding in some more of the mounts and securing the large glass panes on this side of the factory. And we also see the steel structure itself is now grown all the way across the site towards the west and has joined the new structure that has been being erected on that southwest corner. And again, we'll get some closer views here shortly. But this is a great long distance look across River Road and the Cyber Pond at how the building extension is coming along. And I'll reposition the drone down lower in a moment and give you some closer in views. But right now, as I pull away, give you a nice view across the entire site, looking up towards the northeast, and then down next to the bridge of the middle highway. We can see the work that continues in this section for some of that HDPE pipe, for the treated water, and some other work that they are doing. And this is a great view across the highway to that west support facility, where we'll see many new developments on that side of the site as well. But for right now, let's bring the drone down and let's take a closer look at the steel structure for the building extension. Here we see the steel structure on the southwest. Most of it now has been connected to the steel structure that was originally put up on the east side. And this section in the middle is that bridge that has now joined these into essentially one large structure. See the crane very busy picking up some of the smaller beams that will be installed. And I'll turn back and give you a zoom in and get a good look at how this operation takes place, and also just another kind of sense of scale by looking at the workers. Now the crane lifts up several pieces at once. It's much more efficient. That way they don't have to keep going back and forth as often. And then the workers will guide them in and then install them, and rapidly that steel structure will take form as we are seeing. We see some more of the roof and or the floor decking on the ground getting ready to be moved up. Another section has been added, so we'll be seeing concrete shortly in that area. The columns are painted black because they will be behind the glass, and that will help them blend in. And speaking of which, we can get a good sense of more deliveries in those crates for the large glass panels. Here's a good view in to see the work that is going on to prepare for more glass panels and also securing the ones that have been installed. And it gives you a good sense of the scale of these panes of glass with those workers on that man lift. And another thing that I noticed, and I mentioned earlier, but I'll give you a closer view, is that the perimeter grade beam is being extended here now. You can see some of the forms and some of the crews working on rebar and some more trenching. This will continue around where those tanks are, and that will form the base of the walls on this part of the factory as well. And I'm going to give you a good close-in view. It's kind of interesting that in the time it took for me to fly around from the east side to the south side and back, they've added 2 more sections of the walls for the tanks. So the one on the right is now at the 6th level, just like the other ones. And again, on the left, you can see the tops for the tanks have been delivered and prepared, and those will be lifted up and welded on here very soon. So we now know the height of those tanks. It's pretty large tank capability that they've added in here. More work on the footings in this particular part of the factory, and this gap between the Stamping 2 extension and the main building on the right and the new building on the left. And eventually we're going to see this all filled in with steel and all joined together under one common roof. This is a great view from this vantage point of the cranes in action, the steel structure that's being added. The crew on the ground, again, is a great sense of scale. And we see some of the roof and floor decking being added onto this part of the structure as well. The work on the footings and the perimeter grade beam on the right-hand side continues. And a big change in this southwest temporary lot where we've seen a lot of Cybertrucks. They've moved this new trailer. They're in the process of assembling it. And the Cybertrucks are being stored in this smaller section. And I think it's partly because with the new outbound lot on the west, this is no longer needed. But good view of these Cybertrucks waiting for their opportunity to move over to that new outbound lot. As we fly to the north along the west side of the factory, I want to show you the progress on these receiving doors. And these have had some modifications and also been added on. There were some temporary concrete panels, and you can see that the markings for these receiving doors have not been placed yet. So these are an addition and a rework of some of the receiving doors to better suit the needs for this part of the site. We see a lot of crew working on the landscaping next to the west main entrance, and the work on those 3 parallel concrete beams by the road looks to be completed. And the Model Y outbound, the end of line coming out of the building, looks fairly busy as well today. So I'm going to give you a good view across the highway of the west side, and we'll resume the narration on that side of the highway. As I mentioned, a lot of activity here on the north end of the end-of-line building. We see more of the asphalt has now been added. There's some form work for probably a sidewalk being made on the middle and bottom left of the screen. We also see the part of the outbound lot still in dirt with some of the curbs and preparation for more of the asphalt being applied. And of course, the new outbound lot has new trailers, or the trailers that were moved from the east side, and also a lot more of the vehicles and trucks picking them up. And I'll give you a closer view of that here shortly. But first, I wanted to give you a good look at the progress with the supercharger stations. There's 64 of them here right now, and eventually these will be covered with a canopy. On the center of the screen, we see more of the trenching that heads to the south and then along this entire area. So continue to monitor to see what this is going to be and how they're going to configure this part of the site. Now, this part of the outbound lot where the asphalt comes to an end eventually is going to be filled in with more asphalt, and we'll see the rest of the numbers that will go from B or Bravo 1 through 13, and right now it currently starts at 13. And as I continue to maneuver the drone here, it's a good view of the transport trucks and also the new Model Ys, and this shows you their arrival and check-in to the outbound lot and how this process is working. As I mentioned, a lot more of the vehicles and transport trucks, and this gives you a good sense of how that operation is being set up for even more vehicles. And we see some more of the Cybertrucks and the Model Ys in that fenced-in section and along the east side of the outbound lot. As I pull back towards the south, we're going to take a look at the boring company and the site that they are continuing to prepare and get ready for the tunneling. On the left is the spoils concrete basin area, and also that belt cassette, which will help remove the dirt or the spoils out of the tunnel as that operation is underway. And here's a good look at that kind of a conveyor that will remove the dirt and put it onto those belts on that belt cassette to remove it out of the tunnel. And it looks like the Proof Rock 3, the thrust ring, and possibly even some of the first set of concrete segments might be installed right at that thrust ring. We talked a lot about this equipment in the intro, so hopefully that and what we are seeing now with additional assembly is helpful and kind of puts into context what we are looking at. But this is a good view of that conveyor system and how the dirt will be extracted from the Proof Rock 3 as that tunneling operation continues, plus some of the additional items that are under those black tarps, and a good view of the grout factory here with those cement silos and the tanks and the trailers to prepare for that grout or mortar mixture, and again that belt cassette. And you can get a good view of how all of this will work together once it's fully assembled. And I hope that again, what we talked about in the intro and what we saw here really comes into context, and we have a better understanding of what is going on. Now, one of the things I also mentioned in the intro is that the concrete segments or modules that are put together to make the tunnel segments are being delivered. And you can see this truck here. You can see a lot of them being stored temporarily in this location. The worker on the truck gives you a good idea of the size of each of these concrete segments. And as we talked about in the intro, there will be about 1,200 of these once the tunnel is completed. And again, a good view of how this entire west side looks today, including that west warehouse on wheels. So I hope that you enjoyed what we talked about in the intro for the boring company and the tunneling process, the views around the site, and what we were able to talk about throughout the video. As always, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Happy Valentine's Day.